And oh, who killed Cock-Rob and all that. And Danny loved the swing of it. The next thing you know, he is singing the song and doing his scat chorus, which was brilliant. And Sylvia's eyes lit up, and you could see that that was just a romance made in heaven.
Candy kisses wrapped in paper.
Just as their relationship was developing, they were both offered a job performing at a place called Camp Tamiment, which was a sort of Borscht Belt, only more so for trade unionists, mostly Jewish, sort of people who ate the same sort of food in the Borscht Belt, but got a lot better shows. The shows were so good that the New York impresarios, the Schubert brothers, decided to take the best of the material and turn it into their own Broadway production called the Straw Hat Revue.
Danny was a big success in the Straw Hat Revue. He got marvelous notices, and lots of agents tried to get in touch with him. I think that was his first whoop.
When it closed, he was out of work. In a state of, I suppose, depression, he went to Florida. And from there, he dialed Sylvia's number. He was going to propose marriage, except that when she answered the phone, he put it down. He funked it. But Sylvia knew what was coming and took off for Florida herself.
If I asked my parents, there would be objections, discussions, and arguments. So we eloped and were secretly married.
The relationship, I should say the symbiotic relationship, between Sylvia and Danny was fascinating to watch. Of course, Danny leaned heavily on Sylvia's creativity. Would he have succeeded without Sylvia? My feeling is undoubtedly he would have succeeded without Sylvia. Was it very important to him at that stage in his life to have Sylvia behind him? Extremely important.
Most of the material she wrote was based on what Danny could do already. And it's not detracting anything from Sylvia.
I have, or I had, a kind of radar for Danny. I sensed very early that Danny was very elegant as a performer.
I am Anatole of Paris, I shriek with chic. My hat of the week goes 6 divorces, 3 runaway horses. I'm Anatole of Paris, the hats I sell make husbands yell. Is that the hat or a two-room flat? Voilà quadron 7, wesh, laisse interrompeur. Oh, room 12, c'est lettre parlor, bedroom, basse. Let me get my paw on a little piece of straw, and voila! A chapeau at 60 bucks a throw. It's how I pull and chew on the little things I do.
I first met Danny Kaye when he exploded on the scene at La Martinique, a club in Manhattan. He did everything. He sang, he danced, and the material was so wonderful. And what was really most outstanding is how graceful he was with all of that. And suddenly it spread all over New York that there's a new guy on the block, Danny Kaye.
Morse went to see Danny Kaye at the Martinique. In fact, he brought Garbo with him, and he thought he was wonderful, and he recognized this extraordinary talent. And when he wrote Lady in the Dark, he had a part that he wrote. I think he probably wrote it with Danny in mind.
He played the effete photographer, the fashion photographer, and he did it superbly.
So it was really a very classy show, with Moss Hart writing the book, Kurt Weill with the music, Ira Gershwin with the lyrics, and Gertrude Lawrence.
Who said to me one summer night, I was so hot today I just had to take off my nail polish. And it helped to create a new international star, Danny Kaye.
And he came forth at one point and sang a song called Tchaikovsky, in which, in about 1 minute flat, he rattled off with impeccable precision the names of about 60 Russian composers.
There's Malachevsky, Rubinstein, Arensky, and Tchaikovsky, Sapelnikov, Dmitriev, Cherepnin, Kryzhenovsky, Godovsky, Artabuchev, Voniyusko, Wakimenko, Soloviev, Prokofiev, Tiomkin, Gorochenko, there's Glitter, Winter, Botniatsky, Rebnikov, Felinsky, Metel, Balakirev, Zolotorov, and Kruschinsky, and Sokolov, and Kopolov, Tukalsky, and Kanovsky, Shostakovich, Boda, Dinglier, and Novakovsky, there's Lyudov, and Kalaganov, Markevich, Panchenko, Darumisky, Chervachevsky, Radon, Vasilenko, Servinsky, Rimsky, Korsakov, Mussorgsky, Angelchaninov, and Glazunov, and Sezan, Kalinikov, Hamanov, Servinsky, Angelchaninov, Rumchinsky, and Nachmanov. I really have to stop the subject.
When he finished, they couldn't stop applauding. And they applauded and applauded and applauded.
I was smiling and saying, for God's sake, stop applauding, stop applauding, don't applaud so much, stop applauding.
And Danny told me later, he says, as I was bowing to the applause, the thought that went through my head was, I'm out. That's the worst thing that could have happened to me. Gertrude Lawrence follows me in a moment, singing the next number. I brought the house down. I'm sure to be cut out of the show.
When it was time for her to top Danny, she got up and she did the bumps and the grinds and the kicks on the proscenium.
Jenny made her mind up when she was 3. And all of us on stage were looking at her. The audience was flabbergasted.
She'd never done the high kicks and the spins and all of the outrageous things she did with Jenny. And of course, she tore the house down.
Now, that was on a Monday night. Wednesday afternoon at the matinee, I had the sense that the audience really wasn't paying attention to me. So I looked over on the side, and there was Gertie Lawrence in the swing with a great big red handkerchief going.
Aha. What do I do? I can't go and complain to the management. She's a big star. I'm just a featured player.
That night, she came out to do Jenny. And she did Jenny made her mind up when she was 3. And she was, boom! And there was a laugh where there hadn't been one before.
All I did was look at her, and as she was singing, I just twitched my nose a little bit, like this. That's all I did.
And she looked at me, and I bowed to her, and she bowed to me, and she never did the red handkerchief again.
Yankee Doodle's going to town, and they want young fellas like me.
My father had made a couple of comedies with Bob Hope, but he was always on the lookout for a comedian. He came back and he said, I've seen somebody who could be wonderful. The only thing is, I'm not sure he doesn't look too Jewish.
I was doing a show across the street in Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe with my act. I was backstage seeing Danny, and I said, guess what? I'm going to Hollywood. I've got a contract. He said, with whom? I said, with Samuel Goldwyn. He said, really? So am I. Little did we dream we'd be stuck with each other for 4 pictures.
The first 3 things Sam Goldwyn said about me in a group of people was, we have to be very careful how we handle this boy because he's not good looking, he can't act, and he has no sex appeal.
They tried everything. They tried photographing him, putting makeup on, and one day my mother suggested that often a person with a large nose, by changing the color of their hair, offsets it. And so the decision was made to make Danny blonde.
The picture was called Up in Arms, and it came out at the time of the war, and it was about a draftee in the Army. Danny played a hypochondriac in the picture.
They got a hospital just for me.
One thing about Danny is he truly was a hypochondriac. Therefore, he could play it very well.
The flames say I'm go report the doctor to get you to beat the say. He'll get you Kaye. I don't the flames say to get you to beat the sound. Give him gown to get you say. He'll hire doc. I don't the flames say to get you to beat the sound. Give him gown to get you say. We got to get it. I listen to the fine specimen. Oh no, to get you to beat the say. Give him gown to get you say. We'll get you Kaye flat feet. Get you to beat the sound. Give him gown to get you say. We'll get you Kaye high, to give him gown to get you say. We'll get you Kaye hold on the play, daddy boy, and I tell to give him gown to get you say. We'll get you Kaye how to the play, say to get you to them, to get you to them, to get you to them, to get you to them. 1A.
He was young. He had the bloom of Broadway, which even though this town pretended to look down upon it, that was a great thing to be coming from Broadway.
Danny's performance in motion pictures was a natural progression from the Danny Kaye that we knew at the Martinique.
Who ever heard of a musical picture without Carmelita Pepita, the Bolivian bombshell?
I wish you could come with me to my little village in Bolivia. So peaceful there are the purple mountains with the lovely mist and the shining stars. And the little people who live so simple and quiet. And every night all they want to do
Oye, se quiere ustedes marraca ser conga. Era mamora que se de que te ride que sale mamá e repetonga, a ripetonga, a rayetonga, e a repetonga, repetonga, repetonga.
And I don't think anybody realized the true significance of Sylvia's contribution. Sylvia was a bottomless pit, and if something wasn't working, Sylvia sensed it instantly, and she would come in and revamp it, and Danny would learn it like that.
She was not a spontaneous personality like Danny was, but she appreciated humor, and she would laugh, and she could understand, and also she had a great comic sense for the type of thing that made Danny famous.
You sense a kind of a feeling of resentment every once in a while, because Sylvia really was always right, and in a very quiet way, that'll drive you crazy.
When I think of Danny Kaye, I think of a man whom you could ask anything of as far as a performer is concerned, and the more difficult it was, the more fun he had doing it, and the better he did at it. I mean, the opera number in Wonder Man was the resolution of the plot. Danny is being chased by the mafia of the period who had murdered his twin brother. In order to escape, he puts on the costume of the opera singer and runs out on the stage where the heavies can't follow him. Now, the whole idea is Danny had to give the information to the district attorney without getting killed. The lyric of the opera must give the information to the district attorney and also save Danny's life.
See me! To kill or gangster or nab me, grab me, stab me. O'Brien! 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 Nothing but the truth.
When Roosevelt died and Truman took over, Truman okayed something called the Loyalty Order of 1947. And that loyalty order meant that if any member of the government would not answer the famous question, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party, they could be dismissed without a hearing. Well, I felt something had to be done about it. Ira Gershwin felt the same way. So did John Huston, and we formed this committee, and we did fly to Washington. Danny Kaye was on the plane, Gene Kelly, Marcia Hunt, Richard Conte. But when we got there, the press started to attack us. Now, for most of these people, this was the first time they had ever been attacked by the press, and a lot of them couldn't take it. And the first one to cave in was Humphrey Bogart. Then Frank Sinatra dropped away, Gene Kelly dropped away, Marcia Hunt dropped away, Danny Kaye. They all divorced themselves from us. I certainly think Danny Kaye was sorry he got into this committee to defend the Hollywood 10. He was in politics until the heat was on, and then he found he couldn't take it.